My theme is how the betrayal of liberal education corrupts students' character and corrodes their ability to contribute to the public debate in a free society. What I'm going to focus on, though, are the unspoken and unofficial but very powerful lessons of the university curriculum, of campus life, and of professors' professional conduct. An auto repair shop in which mechanics and owners couldn't distinguish a wreck from a finely tuned car would soon go out of business. A hospital where doctors, nurses, and administrators were unable to recognize a healthy human being would present a grave menace to the public health. A ship whose captain and crew lacked navigation skills and knowledge of their destination would spell doom for the passengers and cargo entrusted to their care. Yet at universities and colleges throughout the land, parents and students paid large sums of money for, federal and state governments contribute sizable tax exemptions to support liberal education. The money flows even though universities and colleges lack a coherent idea about what constitutes an educated human being. Of course, if parents, alumni, professors, and students are happy, why worry? And this remains the case for all the talk of the higher education bubble. This remains the case at our elite institutions. So why worry? What if universities, for lack of a standard, are unable to say whether their graduates are well educated? At least at our elite institutions, a college degree remains a hot commodity, a ticket to entry to valuable social networks, a signal to employers that graduates have achieved a certain proficiency in manipulating concepts, performing computations, and getting along with peers. If universities continue to offer parents a good return on investment, donors a pleasant place to practice philanthropy, professors good research opportunities, and students a convivial 4 years in which to get ready for their careers, why not leave well enough alone? And supposing that some harm is inflicted on students through exposure to foolish ideas and sloppy intellectual habits, the fact is that undergraduate education lasts only 4 short years. How much damage can it do? And moreover, once they leave campuses, graduates will encounter the everyday world of work, spouses, mortgages, children. Won't these new responsibilities overcome any lingering effects of bad intellectual habits? Turns out this way of thinking about the university is quite common and dangerously complacent. We would not be content to learn that our auto repair shops cause no permanent damage to our cars only. We are not pleased if the best we could say was that our hospitals are not systematically making patients sicker. And we'd hardly be satisfied because our captains and crews are just simply not sinking their ships. So why should we be content to conclude that our universities do no lasting harm to the country's young men and women? In my view, the view of my panelists, I think, co-panelists, genuine liberal education is itself the proper education for citizenship in a free society. And the betrayal of liberal education undermines our students' capacity to use their freedom well and to fulfill their responsibility to maintain free institutions. The solution to the problem does not consist in more courses on social justice or citizenship. As Saul Stern has already indicated, these are usually courses in justice progressively understood. And to be clear, like Saul Stern, I would not favor a course in justice conservatively understood masquerading as a course in social justice or citizenship. A genuinely liberal education involves introducing students to the range of views about justice, progressive and conservative. Moreover, a genuinely liberal education provides invaluable benefits for students and the nation. For most students, it offers the last chance, perhaps until retirement, to read widely and deeply, to acquire knowledge of the opinions and events that form them and the nation in which they live, and to study other peoples and cultures. And the nation benefits because a liberal democracy presupposes an informed citizenry capable of distinguishing the public interest from private interest, a citizenry capable of evaluating consequences, a citizenry capable of discerning the claims of justice and the opportunities for and the limits to realizing justice in politics. I believe we see evidence of the failure of liberal education, or failure of our colleges and universities to provide a genuinely liberal education in our national political culture. In January, in his second inaugural address, President Obama called on Americans to act, I quote here, as one nation and one people, close quote, and bring to, his phrase, the debates of our time, again, President Obama's phrase, a common effort and common purpose. He didn't offer any remedies for the partisan rancor that marks our political discourse. As for identifying the sources of the problem, he left it at the suggestion that the cause was obstruction and extremism of Republicans. As it turns out, partisan rancor in our public discourse has been much lamented, especially by professors, especially of law and politics. They deplore our politicians' incapacity to see things from the other side's point of view. They deplore our incapacity to speak civilly and achieve compromise for the sake of the public interest. They too, that is, our professors of law and politics, tend to believe that the source of the problem is loudmouthed and unenlightened conservatives. What the professors fail to recognize, it seems to me, is their own role in shaping the landscape they condemn. Officially, our colleges and universities remain committed to providing students a liberal education. Of course, I'm not using the word liberal and liberal education in the narrow partisan sense of the term, left wing of the Democratic Party. Rather, liberal in the classical sense. Liberal education involves open and far-ranging instruction in the humanities, social sciences, and sciences, and it's got a purpose. The purpose is to prepare citizens for life in a free society. Now, the primary task of liberal education is to transmit knowledge and cultivate students' ability to think for themselves. Liberal education is not in the first place about molding character. Indirectly, however, educators cannot help but shape character. Liberal education is civic education, since its aim is to prepare students for freedom. When faculty perform their jobs properly, liberal education fosters above all the virtue of intellectual integrity. Intellectual integrity involves respecting facts, honoring evidence, vigorously exploring arguments, and cherishing the inevitable and illuminating diversity of opinion in a free society. And the virtue of intellectual integrity fortifies civic discourse. But when faculty abuse liberal education, they corrupt students' character. This can happen in two ways. Professors may neglect their basic pedagogical and scholarly responsibilities, or they may use the classroom to advance narrow professional interests or partisan opinions. The nation then suffers. The nation suffers because our universities send forth into the political world young citizens less capable of accurately weighing evidence, of patiently considering alternative perspectives, and of presenting arguments and counter-arguments cogently. This erodes civic discourse. In the United States today, as many panelists have already pointed out, also yesterday, the abuse of liberal education by our colleges and universities is rampant. Here, next 10 minutes or so, I want to give 10 examples of how such abuse, the abuse of liberal education, corrupts character, not only that of students, and erodes the qualities the students will need to play a constructive role in political debate about the principles and policies that should guide the nation. First, our colleges and universities have hollowed liberal education's core. Most impose a few general distribution requirements and broad categories of inquiry. They thereby send the message to students that there are no basic principles, ideas, and events, and no classic works of literature, politics, economics, philosophy, and religion with which all educated men and women, progressive and conservative, should be familiar. This approach encourages students to equate education with the random accumulation of information and the clever manipulation of convictions. That's corrupting. Second, the curriculum has been politicized. Not always overt, this is accomplished through the readings professors choose, the ideas and events they present, the questions they ask, those they glide over or suppress, and the interpretations they treat as beyond reproach, and the interpretations they treat as beneath contempt. This attitude flows naturally from the professor's own ideology. It may not be an organized conspiracy, but the upshot is that in class after class, students are exposed to debate that is largely restricted to progressive alternatives. Meanwhile, conservative opinions are either blithely ignored or contemptuously dismissed. This is corrupting. It fosters arrogance among progressive students. It fosters resentment among conservative students, and it fosters dismay among all those progressives, conservatives, the non-aligned, who come to college seeking intelligent exploration of the conflicting perspectives that constitute the life of a liberal democracy. Third, grade inflation is widespread. Faculty, particularly at elite institutions, have made A's and A- routine, B+ a gentle reproach, B a harsh reproach, and anything less unthinkable. By conferring unearned approbation, professors inflate students' self-esteem and they undercut students' self-respect. And students detect the scam. They know that distinguishing among levels of performance on their papers would require professors' time and energy, or that of the graduate students who often do the grading in large classes. By slapping high grades and a few vague comments on papers, rather than patiently explaining where the work is weak and how it could be improved, professors instill in students disdain for the academic process and an extravagant sense of entitlement. Fourth, speech codes, written and unwritten, have become commonplace. Some codes prohibit hate speech, and some merely prohibit offensive speech. The aim is to outlaw speech that causes hurt, and hurt is typically defined subjectively. To enforce the rules, higher education turns faculty and administrators into thought police and students into informers. This chills the speech of those, students and professors, trying out new ideas and defending unpopular causes. And it transforms the university from a forum for the robust exchange of ideas to a training ground for the repackaging and regurgitation of dogma. Fifth, prevalent disciplinary procedures upend fundamental features of due process. The accused in sexual misconduct cases is routinely deprived of adequate representation and the opportunity to confront and cross-examine his accuser. The most serious cases, including allegations of rape, should be handled by the police and the criminal justice system. They should not be, but all too commonly are, handled by professors, administrators, and students who generally and for the most part have little knowledge, among other things, of how to collect, preserve, and analyze evidence. In college disciplinary proceedings, colleges often convict with the lowest standard of proof in the American judicial system. Indeed, the Obama administration's Department of Education has pressured colleges and universities to adopt, in sexual misconduct cases, the preponderance of evidence standard. That is 50% plus an iota. This is in contrast to the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, which is characteristic of the American criminal justice system and the great traditions of liberty in the West. By teaching that it's better to convict the innocent than risk letting the guilty go free, or by teaching that in cases involving sex, the accusation itself is sufficient warrant for a guilty verdict, by teaching this, our campuses teach our students despotic justice. 6, our colleges and universities have engaged in hypocrisy on affirmative action. They claim that easing standards in hiring and admission for minorities advances the educational mission by promoting diversity in the student body and faculty, but our colleges and universities want it both ways. Recall, fair-skinned and blue-eyed former Harvard Law School professor Elizabeth Warren was accused in her 2012 Massachusetts senatorial campaign of gaming the system by claiming Native American ancestry at various stages of her academic career. In response, she and her allies were quick to declare that she derived no advantage from affirmative action policies and that all of her achievements were her own. In so declaring, Warren and her allies cast aspersions on the practice and on all its beneficiaries. 7, the higher education establishment collaborates with the government to maintain the student loan racket. In many private institutions, the cost of a 4-year bachelor's degree now exceeds $220,000 for 4 years. Even students at state universities can graduate owing 6 figures, debt that is non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. When lawmakers make more funds for loans available, universities raise tuition to grab the government largesse. Meanwhile, data show that students are failing to develop those practical skills that colleges and universities continue to insist they specialize in honing: precise reading, clear thinking, and lucid writing. At elite universities, students can console themselves that at least they're obtaining a respected credential and gaining entry into valuable social networks. Such consolation, however, comes at a high price. It only reinforces the cynical message that liberal education is a charade. 8, our colleges and universities exploit the most vulnerable members of their communities, graduate students. In the best case, graduate students in the humanities and social sciences receive subsistence-level support while performing essential tasks such as teaching sections and grading papers, which faculty generally consider drudgery. These same graduate students become acutely dependent on the faculty for whom they teach and grade and who advise their dissertations. This is because career-making and career-breaking decisions for the graduate students frequently do not turn on thorough reading of their work by voting members of the department. That rarely happens. Rather, the decisions turn on letters written by a small number of faculty advisors. The result is a kind of closed shop that encourages groupthink and discourages boldness and dissent, with reverberations throughout the university. 9, faculty make hiring, promotion, and tenure decisions in matters where they lack competence. Over the last 40 years or so, the disciplines have divided and subdivided, fractured and multiplied. On any given personnel decision, only a small proportion of faculty in a department will have the mastery of the subject necessary to offer an informed and independent judgment of the quality of the candidate's work. Consequently, faculty members are habituated to offering opinions and casting votes on matters of which they are ignorant. This fosters the formation of an authoritarian spirit on campus that advances and submits to opinions based on status rather than genuine knowledge and expertise. And this authoritarian tone and style reverberates throughout the halls of higher education. 10, finally, our colleges and universities use a system of peer review for professional journals and university presses that is transparent where it should be confidential and confidential where it should be transparent. Journals typically use a double-blind system in which neither author nor reviewer knows the other's identity, but editors easily assign manuscripts for review to obtain desired outcomes because they can quickly discern where the article fits in methodological debates and whether it contains a politically disapproved message. Indeed, since any scholar with the expertise to qualify as a reviewer is also likely to be a player whose own academic fortunes will be helped or hindered by the publication of the article under review, all reviewers are also interested parties. Meanwhile, and making matters worse, university presses, heavily subsidized university presses, frequently use a single-blind system in which the reviewer of a book manuscript is apprised of the author's identity, but the reviewer's identity is kept from the author. This gives reviewers protection and license to reward friends and punish enemies, and to reward friends and students of friends and punish enemies and students of enemies. This, by the way, is a fine morality for the battlefield, but incompatible with devotion to the disinterested pursuit of the truth, which is what ostensibly sets university presses apart and justifies the substantial subsidies that enable them to operate. In conclusion, our political and intellectual class is increasingly homogeneous. This homogeneity derives in significant measure from its members having passed through our elite colleges and universities. It is small wonder that not only our politicians, but also our journalists and our makers of television and film have grown increasingly incapable of conducting mature and measured discussions of the great challenges that the country faces. Their liberal education, which is a kind of civic education in itself, abounds in lessons of cynicism, hypocrisy, and immoderation. Professors, as I've said, particularly in the humanities, social sciences, and law, take pride in advancing the public good by exposing corruption, speaking truth to power, and advising politicians and various and sundry professionals on how to conduct themselves more ethically. Given the critical importance of a genuinely liberal education to preparing citizens for freedom, professors could have the most salutary impact on the long-term health of liberal democracy in America by cleaning up their own house. Thank you.